Welcome to this week's episode of Women Unheard. I am actually on the road, as you can see, and very happy to be on the road and sitting with Chelsea Falotico, the outreach manager for VIP in Pike and Wayne counties, Pike and Wayne, Pennsylvania counties. For anybody that's listening to me local to North Carolina, I'm in Pennsylvania today. So welcome, Chelsea. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for being here. Thanks for coming here and for talking to us.
Of course. And this is like out of the normal realm for my podcast because I'm always like, I want you to tell your story and da 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 da. But considering I've only had like 6 episodes-ish by the time this will air. I just have, everybody's been sexually abused or their partner's been sexually abused. And oh God, I've got goosebumps already. Like, I just feel like I'm just so called to be sitting with an expert in this. And I'm so grateful it's you, right? Because we've been working together for years now. Yeah. And I love that we can like full circle collaborate together like this. But I feel very called to talk more about sexual abuse and how it impacts you and your relationships. And oh my God, yeah. I'm really supposed to be here.
This is the right place, the right time, for sure. Gosh,
because we've been working together for, I don't know, 6 years or so now.
Even before I was at VIP.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You reached out. You wanted to connect and work together. I forgot about that almost. Oh my God.
Yeah, girl, it's been a long time.
Yes. But I don't know. Despite being in this space with you and working on, spreading the word and awareness, I just never really understood the depth of how many people sexual abuse touches.
Yeah.
Like, I literally, I feel like almost everybody I've talked to or has wanted to be on my podcast has been sexually abused in some way or another. And some of the cases I literally have said, I love you and I would be so happy to tell your story, but I feel it might be a little more triggering than it would be helpful right now for you.
Yeah. No, that's a really good sense of awareness to have, because sometimes, and we put on events at VIP to bring awareness to multiple causes and victimizations, and sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape. That's a big chunk of what we do. That's a big chunk of the work we do and the clientele that we work with are those survivors. And we're always looking for speakers at certain events to help share their story or spread a message or empower other survivors to find help, to find their voice. And we're always very careful because it's very easy to talk to a counselor one-on-one about what's happening, but then you get up in front of a crowd and we have no control over who comes in or who's going to listen to it and who's going to hear your story. And it's almost like this really extreme stage fright comes across somebody where I was ready to do this, and now I'm in crisis in my own head in front of a whole group of people.
Yeah.
And that's really scary. So we work really hard with people to make sure that they are prepared, they're ready, they know the words to use, they know how to navigate their own story in a way that feels comfortable to share with complete strangers.
And I'm going to cry through this. I know I am, because it breaks my heart. Motherhood has just really softened me.
Oh, I feel it.
God, girl. Yeah. But it just is so incredible to me how much shame that the people that have been sexually abused carry, right? Like, that just breaks my heart for them. Like, how can you, I mean, I understand it, right? Like, but to have to carry around shame after what's happened to you, it just breaks my heart. breaks my heart.
And it's, I mean, for kids and for adults, right? Like there are almost two spectrums to sexual assault and sexual abuse. Childhood sexual assault and things that happen after 18. So whether you're in college or you're an adult or you're an elder or a senior citizen, even in a home, like that is something that just flies under the radar. But there's always this sense of, I should have stopped it or I should have prevented this. And even some of the ways that we used to teach kids about sexual assault prevention or sexual abuse prevention, it used to be like, no, go tell. But how much pressure does that put on a kid to recognize that something's wrong? And then if they don't go tell, then it's, I did something wrong because I didn't follow the rules. I didn't go tell. And now how do you tell? It's like you break a lamp at home and you don't tell your parents. And then you go a few weeks and they're like, oh, the cat knocked over this lamp, and you're just going with it. And now it's 10 years later, and you're like, how do I tell my parents that I broke the lamp? But 10 years down the road, like, how do I now tell somebody that this has happened to me as a kid? And you carry it for a really long time.
Oh, God, that's so heartbreaking.
It is. And I think the statistic is like 1 in 10 children who have been abused will tell somebody as a child. I don't know the statistic for how many come out later as an adult, but out of 10 children who are sexually assaulted, only 1 of them will say something, will disclose to somebody as a child.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know.
So, I know before I start bawling my eyes out.
It's hard because this is my career, right? Like this is what I do every day. This is what I talk about. So I feel like your reaction is what it's supposed to be, right? Like that's what we want. We want people to know that like, oh my God, like this is a horrible epidemic that's happening. And we want people to be emotional about it because emotions are what set change into motion. And if I sound cold, let me know, because I feel like 10 years into this work, I'm like, okay, you should just stop like throwing the word rape around because not everybody is comfortable hearing it 40 times in a sentence the way I am. So just let me know.
Oh, you'll see it in my face.
Reel it in.
No. Yeah, and but I think also that I don't think you sound cold. I think it sounds very knowledgeable. And I think that that's what people, especially people that might be listening to this, that have been sexually abused, might need to hear, right? Like, because it's not like a cold, it's like a comforting, knowledgeable, like, at least that's how it feels to me.
Okay, well, good.
But I've also not been sexually abused, so thankfully. But to that point, like, I really had no idea how many people sexual abuse really touches.
Yeah. In America, so in America as a whole, right, every 68 seconds, and I just know like these stats because I look at them all day long, but every 68 seconds, somebody in America is sexually abused, and every 9 minutes, one is a child. So every 9 minutes,
wow,
a child in America is sexually assaulted.
Wow. That's just so insane. And the craziest part about that is a lot of kids.
It's a lot of children. I think, even come on, Chelsea, these numbers, man. I think it's like close to 60,000 per year.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I really, honestly, I was hoping that, like the generation of our kids, it was going to be better because we're more aware.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and it might still be. Like, there's still hope.
Yeah.
Because nothing's going to change if people don't talk about it, right? So we're talking about it. People are going to be listening to it. And knowing that it's happening is the first step. Knowing that it could happen or knowing the signs or just having that general knowledge tucked away in the back of your mind is how it stops happening.
So that's actually a really good point. Like, what are the signs in kids?
So if you can break it down by age group too, right? And some stuff is really hard, especially when you start talking about teenagers, because teenagers are moody. Yeah. So you're like, oh my gosh, is this child like sexually assaulted, or are they just moody. 16?
Yeah.
Like, are you just a 14-year-old girl going through it right now? But a lot of common signs, and every person is different. So some kids, nothing. You would never know. And other kids, all the signs are there. And then, like I said, sometimes they're just part of normal development and it's really hard to catch. But like regressions, going back to thumb sucking, bedwetting is a big sign. Changes in their social behavior. Maybe they were really social before and now they're very withdrawn. Becoming very aggressive or very fearful, like kind of shrinking away from people, trying to just make themselves smaller and inconspicuous. Mm-hmm. Again, that goes with that social aspect of just isolating themselves a lot. And for younger kids, having like knowledge of sexual behavior that's really just above their age appropriateness or above their age level. And some kids start to act out by sexually abusing other kids too. Yeah. That can, and I think it's important to recognize too that not all perpetrators of sexual abuse are adults. Some of them are older siblings doing it to younger siblings. And then it breaks open that question of, what happened to you? What made you do this to your little siblings or your cousins or other kids on the bus? Like it can open up a real wormhole of a discussion. And in teenagers, a lot of times you might see trouble in school, right? So those grades are slipping, or a disinterest in anything that they used to be really interested in, like pulling out of their extracurriculars or not doing sports anymore, not signing up for stuff, not hanging out with their friends. Again, very withdrawn. What are some of the other signs that we can typically, I know I'm missing like a big one for that social and emotional aspect. But if you're talking physical, it's your typical physical signs of abuse, like any kind of bruising or like lacerations, bleeding or discomfort, sexually transmitted infections in a young kid, pregnancy at a young age, right? Like, it's, yeah, there are a lot of signs. And again, it's oftentimes I don't know that we recognize the signs until the floodgates have opened, because kids are so hard.
Yeah.
As a mom, like it's so hard to navigate. And now my outlook is very different as a new mom too, where even just today getting in the car, he's like, I want to stay home. And my mind instantly goes, why don't you want to go to daycare? Did something happen? And no, he's a kid that wants to stay home because he wants to watch Mickey Mouse.
Or like, play with his toys.
Yes. Yeah. So it's so hard to differentiate between what's normal childhood behavior and what's a possible warning sign. But just knowing that, oh, why don't you want to go to school is an appropriate question. Like you can ask those questions, have that conversation. And when they're older, right, have the conversation about sex. And I know we don't want to think about that talking to like our 6-year-olds about it, but giving them knowledge is giving them power to understand that something's not right. And when sometimes they still do like the good touch, bad touch, right? And that's their view of sexual abuse prevention. But sometimes bad touch feels really good. And that is really
confusing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not always the best way to talk about it with kids, but just letting them know like some parts of our body are for ourselves and nobody except a doctor should be touching them. And if a doctor is looking at you, it's because they want to make sure you're safe, but nobody else should. Simple conversations. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be graphic. It can just be simple. And that's one of the most important things we can do for our kids.
Yeah. So, but so many of those things also feels like a lot of crossover with like domestic abuse.
Oh, absolutely. And they're all the same.
Yeah.
And it's really just a reaction to trauma in general. So whether you've you're a survivor of human trafficking or domestic violence or teen dating violence or sexual assault or harassment or rape, like you're going to go through it all. Maybe you only go through some of it. Maybe you walk away okay. But yeah, there's a lot of overlap with sexual abuse and dating violence.
Yeah. Because they all sound very familiar. Because I've had my own stint with domestic violence a few times. Unfortunately, the last time was like really terrible, which was, I think, like the cycle breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what I think I need to stop being so selfish about, like, talking about kids' sexual abuse and talk more about, like, what happens, like, for adults, right? Like, so this is interesting that I would be interested in knowing, and maybe you know or you don't know, but like, what are the statistics of adults that were sexually abused that just that bury it, and maybe it comes out in some way as they get older?
So I know, depending on where you get your statistics from, and there are some places that will say like RAINN, oh my gosh, rape, assault, incest,
and
yes, National Network. Yeah. Why can I not? Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. I believe the camera's on. Thanks. I think their statistic is 1 in 5. 1 in 5 women will be sexually abused in their lifetime. And then other places like PCAR, the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect, which was the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, theirs is 1 in 6. So it really just depends on where you're looking for your statistics. But the hard thing about statistics is that most of them are based off of what's reported.
Yeah.
And things like sexual violence, domestic violence, human trafficking, those are historically underreported crimes. So that 1 in 6 might just be a fraction of what's actually happening. It's just what we have to go off of. But as for numbers of people who don't report, I don't think we have numbers on that. Right. I don't know if we...
That makes sense,
yeah,
right?
Like I don't... I mean, it does, but it doesn't. I mean, we just said like 1 in 10 children will say something, but that means that there's 9 kids who are abused that don't say anything. And I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that specific question.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm just wondering, like, especially, drawing the parallel or connection to, the fact that it ends up becoming a family cycle, right? Like, typically, Timmy was abused by his uncle, who was abused by someone else, right? And then Timmy grows up and, doesn't tell anybody about it, and is either so overprotective that the kid rebels and is abused, or doesn't see the signs, or you know what I mean? Like, boundaries are an issue for folks that have been sexually abused, right? And that ends up becoming like this long cycle of abuse, right?
Yeah, it can. I think that's more typical when you're talking about domestic violence.
Oh, okay.
Because yes and no, right? Like, it really does. Sexual abuse, especially as a child, is confusing because your personal space has been just ripped apart and invaded. So if you don't get help for that, and you're one of those 9 children that haven't said anything or haven't felt safe to, or nobody's asked the right questions, you just grow up as an adult not knowing yourself, not knowing how to set boundaries or how to expect people to respect your boundaries, or maybe not knowing how to respect other people's boundaries. And so that definitely can cause issues in future relationships, or not understanding consent because nobody gave you an option. So not even realizing that you have to have consent. Like, that's not an option.
Yeah.
So I can see where, yes, absolutely can cause like big issues and continuous cycle, but it doesn't mean that every person who's sexually abused is going to go on to be a sexual abuser, so to speak. When it comes to domestic violence, I think that's why it's more common, because kids who grow up in a home where they're seeing this really unhealthy relationship play out, if they don't have somebody to say, that's not the way love is supposed to look, that's how they replicate their next relationship. And either that's how they assume they're supposed to be treated by a loved one, or that's how they assume they're supposed to treat a loved one. So maybe they end up the victim in a relationship, or maybe they end up the abuser. But a lot of times those kids go on to be in really unhealthy relationships if they don't get that education and that intervention before they're adults.
Why do you think most people don't talk about it? Is it the shame, or they just don't know the available resources? Both?
All of it.
Yeah.
I think it's all of it, and fear too. Because if we're talking mainly about kids, right? They've been groomed, and I can get more into grooming too, because I think that's a really important thing to understand.
I agree.
But they've been groomed to think that either what's happening is okay, and they don't know any better. They're a kid. We can't put that onus on them. So they don't recognize that something's wrong. Or there's a looming threat. If you tell somebody, especially if the abuser is a parent, if you tell somebody, they're going to come and they're going to take me away and they're going to put me in jail, and then you're going to live on the street and you're never going to see mom again. You're 6 years old and somebody's telling you that. What? I'm not going to say a word. Or there's more extreme, maybe that's not the right word to use. There are some cases where there is a threat of, I'm going to kill your family. I'm going to kill your little sister. I'm going to kill your dog. Or with kids, it can be, you're never going to have ice cream again. If you tell somebody at 5, like, that ruins your life, man. Whoa, lips are sealed. So I think fear is a huge reason why kids and adults, because you can use that same threat for us, right? If you tell anybody, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill your children, I'm gonna kill your husband, I'm gonna burn your house, whatever it might be, whatever that threat is, that is terrifying. And this person just violated you in one of the most personal ways. So what's to say they're not going to do that?
Yeah.
So fear, definitely number one. And two, like you said, they don't know that anybody can help them. Yeah. There are so many people out there our age and older who are probably living with this buried secret, because it wasn't until fairly recently that sexual abuse was even talked about. So I do this for a living, and I have my own experience, right? And it wasn't until 2 years later, I was interning for college, that I realized that programs like VIP existed. And when I was 2016, like, nobody told me. So you just don't know that you can get help. You don't know the steps to take. Or I think another reason, and this is a whole nother show we could do, but we're socialized to think it doesn't matter, or that nobody's going to believe me. And sometimes that's true, right? If we look at everything that we see on TV right now, and I'm going to use a very specific example from my life that I remember, and it ruined a friendship for me in a sense. And it was when, and I don't mean to get political, and this is not a political stance in any way, but when they were bringing Kavanaugh into Senate, nope. Oh my gosh.
Don't look at me. I stay so far away from all of that.
You
could be like an alien as president, and I would be like,
Court.
Amazing.
Supreme Court. Oh my gosh. They were bringing Brett Kavanaugh into the Supreme Court, and there was a woman who came forward and said, this man sexually assaulted me. Right?
Now I remember.
And this was a big uproar. People were asking her questions and saying he shouldn't be sworn in. And there was all of this stuff going on. And I, as a survivor, saw a friend post something online that was like, if that happened to her, all she had to do was get up and walk to the nearest police station, and it all would have gone away. But Chelsea now knows that that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Because one, sometimes you don't recognize what happened to you was a rape or an assault, especially if you were drinking, if you were passed out, if you weren't even conscious for it, and you wake up the next day and go to the police station. They're just going to tell you to go to the hospital. You have to go through an extremely invasive forensic rape exam, which is, or I'm sorry, FRE, forensic rape exam, which again, very invasive, especially if your body was just invaded in other ways. If you've ever been to the ER, that's not a great experience because everybody is busy and you sit in a cold room. They have to literally take every article of clothing that you're wearing. So you have to walk out in whatever clothes the hospital has for you, which sometimes is just a gown and your socks. And you have to go home after that and you never see those clothes again. And that rape kit might sit in storage for 15 years because there's no funds to do it. And there's nobody that can properly test it. And even if they do test it and they say, oh, yes, we found DNA that you two were together, now you still have to prove that you didn't want to be together. And how do you, it's all a he said, she said. And who in their right mind wants to go through that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because now that maybe you do go to trial, but the trial is going to be in a year, maybe 2 years, and you're just getting on with your life and you're just moving forward. And then it's, tell me about that night again in front of this entire courtroom filled with people. And tell me, did you say no? Did you put up a fight? Were you drinking? What were you wearing?
Oh,
and having to have those questions thrown at you and answer them on the spot in front of people who are judging you. Nobody wants to do that. So it's not as simple as getting up and going to the police or going to the hospital and pressing charges. It is not that simple. And I don't even know where this question came from or what question I was answering. Why don't people come forward?
Yeah. There
you go. There's 15 reasons right there why people don't come forward after something.
It's just so, I know, I don't know, the whole thing just breaks my heart. But, you're absolutely right. When I had to do my domestic violence, my last stint with it, which was so bad, it was the same thing. Which was even worse is that it was here, right? I knew everybody, right? And I had to, stay in front of the judge, whom I knew, and, a room full of, I thank God I didn't know anybody else that was really sitting in there. But, to just go through the whole bit, it's just, it's really awful.
It is.
Yeah.
And nothing's private. These cases are open. So if you and I wanted to walk over there right now and see what's going on in court, we could sit in that courtroom. Unless there's a child involved. Those are usually closed court cases. But domestic violence cases, getting a protection order, sometimes that's open court in some places. And anybody can come and sit in and watch.
Yeah.
And know everything that's happened to you. And that is terrifying in itself.
Yeah, terrifying, embarrassing, all the things.
Yes. Yeah.
Ay. So, what do you recommend to someone who is struggling as an adult, right? Who's man, woman. I mean, I would imagine it might be slightly different for both, but there would be some generalizations, right? What would you recommend to someone who has been struggling with it, who may or may not have come out about it or is getting help for it? What would you recommend for those folks?
I mean, the first thing I'd want them to know is that they're not alone. We just said every 68 seconds, somebody else is in that same boat with you. It might look a little bit different, but it's the same waters that you're riding in. And the next is that there is a program like VIP in every county throughout America. So that's how big of an epidemic this stuff is. Sexual and domestic violence. There is a program like us in every single county. So call them. And I can't speak to every program, but at VIP, and for anybody who's listening that might not know VIP, we are a domestic violence, sexual assault, and other crimes service center. So we serve victims of all different crimes in all different capacities, from having a safe house for people that need to flee in the middle of the night, to counseling services, to legal services, the whole 9 yards. But one of our busiest services is our 24-hour crisis line. And most, if not all, programs like VIP, like a rape crisis center or a domestic violence center, will have a 24-hour crisis line. And you can call and say, hey, I'm Jane Doe, and this is what's happening to me. You want to give a fake name? Give a fake name, but talk to somebody, because you can't let that live inside your body. It's going to eat you alive.
Yeah, literally, physically, mentally, emotionally. Yeah.
And just the people that do this kind of work, well, we're not here for the money. I can tell you that much. Like, we're a nonprofit, but we're here because we just
want to help.
Yes, and you deserve help, and you deserve to feel safe in your home and in your body and in your community. Like, every person deserves to feel safe and welcome and be able to heal in whatever healing looks like for them. Like, everyone deserves that.
Yeah.
So calling somebody and just talking or asking questions, or sometimes just writing it down. Even if you don't want to talk to somebody, write it down and burn it. Get it out of you in some capacity, whatever feels right or safe for that person. And the same for people who are watching somebody go through it. So if it happens to somebody you love, a lot of times, again, can't speak for every program, but we don't work with just the victims. We'll work with anybody who's been affected. So that might be the mom of a child who was abused. That might be the child of a mom who was abused in a relationship, or an uncle twice removed who's just really close to the family and is watching his niece or nephew go through something, or a neighbor who witnessed something, or a kid who was on the same bus as a kid who was whatever. If it's affecting you, we got to talk about it. And if you're a parent or a child watching somebody else struggle, finding your center, whatever it might be. Some centers like VIP do all in one. Some counties have a specific sexual abuse center and then a domestic violence center separately, but finding the one for you. And you can call the national hotlines too, and they'll connect you with those. And again, it can all be anonymous if you want it to be. But just get it out.
Because hurt people hurt people.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And we want to stop it. You talked about breaking the cycle. Like, that's part of it, is breaking the cycle for yourself too. Yeah. Because there's so much. Sexual abuse isn't something that just happens once and like, oh, it sucks for a week or two and then you get over it. No, this stuff follows you for your entire life. And especially as children, there's this whole study called ACEs, ACE, and it's Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it talks about the effects that trauma has, the effects of trauma when it happens to children in their adult life. And like, crazy things that you would never even think. Like, yes, PTSD, you're higher risk for depression, but you're also 4 times more likely to become an alcoholic. You are twice as likely to attempt suicide. You are 4 times as likely to like have heart disease or high cholesterol or pregnancy complications. Like, all of these things that you would just never think of are related to trauma, because trauma literally changes the chemistry of our body. Like, it's not just a emotional thing that happens. It takes a physical toll on your body too. So you're more likely to develop brittle bone syndrome if you've experienced trauma as a child than somebody who has a like lower ACEs score, so to speak.
I mean, that makes total sense. Like, especially for those of you and me, I do believe in like the whole mind, body, spirit connection, and that, you know, when you've got something going on mentally or emotionally, it's absolutely impacting your body. Like, it just everything is just connected and manifests together. Yeah,
it definitely does. And you got to treat the person as a whole person, not just a mind, not just a body. You're all of it together.
Yeah. So What is I think I know what it is, but what is the one thing that you want listeners to take away from this, or women to take away from this? And is there anything else that you want to share on this episode?
There's a lot. There is a lot I want to share. But I think if it's anything, I can never stress how important it is to find somebody that you can talk to, somebody that you trust, that you can relay this information to, so that you don't have to bear it all by yourself. And I know sometimes people think, like, I don't want to trauma dump on someone because I don't want it to be their burden either. But somebody who loves you is going to be so thankful that you're not holding this inside anymore. And somebody who loves you and respects you will absolutely do their best to make sure that you're okay. And if you don't have one of those people, there are people who will listen to you and who will believe you and who will support you, no questions asked, because that's what we do, is we meet people where they are and we believe you, because we might be the first person that you tell. And if we don't believe you or we question it, you're not going to tell anybody else, because why would I?
Yeah.
So, and for people who are supporters, maybe they are not the ones carrying the trauma, but you know somebody who does, please just believe people when they come forward, because it takes so much courage to utter the words, I'm a survivor, or I was raped, or I was abused. It takes so much courage to say that to somebody. And if you are the first person that they're disclosing to and you don't take it seriously, that might be their one chance. That might be the one time that they were reaching out and you just shut them down. So believe people when they tell you, when they disclose anything like this to you.
All this is so powerful. I can't tell you how many times I felt like my eyeballs were just going to start leaking uncontrollably, because I think it's just because, first and foremost, as a mom, second, for all of the women that I've spoken to that have been abused, and, their partners that have been abused, that, just created a chaos and in their lives, because they've held it in, and it just breaks my heart when people can't be in their heart space and vulnerable to share, to heal.
Yeah. But you're making a difference. If one person listens to this and gets something out of it, or they pick up the phone and make a call, or they start talking to somebody, like, that changed an entire life, an entire world. So everybody has their capability. Like, everybody has a chance to make an impact, and you found yours, and this is it. So,
I hope so.
Yeah, no, it is definitely.
It's definitely a labor of love. Chelsea, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Next year when I come back, because I don't make a yearly pilgrimage up here because it's just too much with the baby. We'll have to have another episode.
Yeah.
And I will absolutely be sure to include VIP's website, the national website.
We have a great website. It looks really great. I'll have to introduce you to our marketing person.
Thanks. I want to include, all the resources that I possibly can on the Women Unheard website, where folks can get help and hopefully reach out to you or whoever is in their area, whether they're in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, wherever they are. But thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and for having this discussion and opening the doors for some people. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody can head over to womenunheard.com or VIPempowers.org for more information and resources. If you have been sexually abused or been abused domestically, our hearts go out to you and we believe you.
Yeah.
And we just want you to heal. And there it goes.
You waited until the end. We made it.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next episode.